Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Sandy.
And this is the Italian American Stories Podcast. Okay, so we are back for episode 2 of Angelina Garramone. And last week we kind of set up her life a little bit, you know, her family, her coming over to America, some of the scams and fraud that she was starting to commit. And today we're going to dive into the murders that she committed. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah. So during this time when Angelina was scheming people out of their homes, being charged with forgery, being arrested, and then ultimately being freed on bail thanks to baby Tony, 2 Italian women, Dorinda Cellante and Maria LaGuardia, went missing from Denver's Italian colony. So we'll start with Dorinda Cellante, who went missing on Saturday, November 12th, 1910. And we actually talked about Dorinda in last week's episode when we were discussing the real estate dealings of Giovanni Iacovetta. What this kind of confirms for us is that Dorinda and Angelina were business associates, or at least close friends.
Right.
Now, sadly, her body was found mutilated in a ditch north of the city a couple of weeks later on November 27th, 1910. So she was missing for about a couple of weeks before her body was found.
Mutilated.
Mutilated too. Yeah, that's quite the word. So she was found by 3 Italian men who were, I don't know what they were doing, but just kind of says that they were out and they actually found her body. So the Italian men, they called over some boys that were out rabbit hunting and asked them to go call the police. But by the time the police got to the murder scene, the Italian men were gone. The police questioned one of the little boys. His name was Tim Sullivan. And he told the police that the Italian men actually paid him to go call the police, which I thought that was weird. Like, why would you pay them? There's 3 of you. One of you could have went to get the police while 2 of you stayed with the body. So, I mean, take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But the little boy said that, you know, they were out, him and his buddies, they were out hunting and they saw 3 Italian men in a wagon, but they kind of just continued hunting. And he said they were crossing a prairie when they saw something black in the field. And as they approached the object, Tim said one of the Italian men spoke up and asked what they were doing. And Tim told them they wanted to see what the black object in the ditch was. So the men called the boys over to them. And once the boys reached the men, one of the men told the boys that it was the body of a dead boy. Why he said boy, I don't know. Maybe he wasn't very close to the body and it just looked small. But apparently Tim said, that ain't no boy. That looks like a dummy. So if you listen to true crime podcasts, and I've talked about this before, a lot of times people will walk up to a dead body and they immediately think that it's a mannequin. So I don't know if that's what he meant by a dummy. And he told the police that he could see the hair and the hand. So it's kind of a weird interaction between the Italian men and these little boys.
Yeah, that's different.
It doesn't add up really. There's like so many weird questions. And
seems like something's missing there.
I agree.
Yeah.
And why did the Italian men just go away? And it was almost like the Italian men were trying to keep the little boys from coming to the body.
Right.
Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into the story of Dorinda. She was born in Campania, Italy on March 16th, 1864. Her first marriage was to Felicito Frazzini on September 10th, 1886 in Italy, and they had 1 child, Francesco. And Felicito, he came to America to find work and get established before he moved Dorinda and their son to America from Italy. But apparently on one of his trips back to Italy, he found that Dorinda actually had 2 children. And the father of that second child apparently was his brother, Omega. It's a little crazy. So Felicito, he went back to America and vowed that he would spend his days forgetting Dorinda. But against Dorinda's wishes, he did take their son, Francesco, back to America with him. But shortly after this incident, Dorinda, she left Italy and came to Denver in early 1899. And when she got to Denver, she found Felicito and he refused to let her in his home or his business. She ended up being taken to the city jail after she refused to leave the saloon that Felicito owned. And an officer actually removed her from the saloon and placed her in the matron's quarter of the city jail for shelter. And now Felicito, he told the officer that he came to this country 13 years ago and left Dorinda in Italy and is currently trying to divorce her. So with this, the authorities, they weren't really sure who to believe. You know, she didn't speak any English, but unfortunately, she didn't know anyone other than her husband. So the authorities were positive that the Italian colony would take her in, but they said if the Italian colony didn't take her in, it was reported that they would send her to the poorhouse for an indefinite amount of time, which that's a little scary. But regardless, Dorinda and Felicito, they were divorced on April 10th, 1899 in Denver. Now, Dorinda, she must have found someone to take her in, and I think that might have been her second husband, Demencio Antonio Labate. And they were married about 1899 in Denver. This was strangely the same year she divorced her first husband, so this kind of makes sense now. And they went on to have 2 children, William and Joseph, but sadly they did divorce in 1905. And their divorce was full of drama, and the Denver newspapers loved every minute of it. They could not get enough of it. So Dorinda was said to be a little difficult during the divorce hearings. She would refuse to be sworn in at the courthouse. She rejected interpreters and yelled at the judge numerous times. Dorinda, she claimed cruelty in her divorce complaint against Demencio. And Demencio, he wanted custody of his 2 sons. He claimed that Dorinda had inappropriate relations with other men. She drank all the time and would call these 2 boys mean names. And because of all these reasons, Demencio stated that Dorinda was not a fit mother. That had to have been an interesting courtroom. It was decided that Dorinda would have custody of the boys, and the judge agreed, but denied any alimony for Dorinda, which was really rare during this time. But Demencio, he took Dorinda back to court 2 weeks later, wanting full custody of the boys, stating that, again, Dorinda was an unfit mother because she was cruel and drank a lot. And in an article from the Rocky Mountain News, they described some of the divorce hearings, and the headline read, "Shades of Italy Fill Court and Divorce Trial." So while this headline is not bad, it's actually the drawing that they did of the 4 Italians that's pretty bad. It's drawn in kind of a cartoonish manner, like almost like a caricature drawing. And one is of Dorinda. She has like a really angry expression on her face, and there are arrows pointing to her clothes, labeling the colors of her shirt. So this is like yellow and orange. I'm not really sure what the point of this was. Do you remember this photo?
Yes, I do. That's why I looked at you. I was like, oh, okay.
I remember this. Yeah. And we'll post all of this stuff back up on social media because I have a photo of it. Dorinda's also depicted like waving her hands around and is saying, "No, sirrah, no, sirrah." So,
well, yeah, I think they were kind of making fun.
Oh, I do too. And I think that's why the Shades of Italy, like they're depicting all of these Italians in this drawing. Because Demencio is also depicted. However, he looks almost distinguished. He has a suit on and a handlebar mustache, and that's kind of it for him. But a Michael Cisco is also represented in the picture, and he's not described in the article as to how he's important to the case, but he's in the drawing, so... His nose is drawn very large, like over exaggerated, right. You know, and he has black dots all over his nose. And so I don't know if this is meant to show freckles, blackheads, or dirt. And he is saying, "I tend my own business." And the way they spell it is like business. But the worst one is of a Miss Flora, who was called as a character witness for Dorinda. And the drawing of her seems to have so she's like wearing this hat, but it has like a bird in it. And it's like a nest. It's really weird. And it kind of looks like a turkey, maybe a chicken. So it's not like a tiny bird. It's like a bigger thing. This is the weirdest part. The bird is making the sound of a donkey. Like it has like a little speech bubble coming out of the bird's mouth, and it's going hee-haw, hee-haw.
Definitely was
meant to demean.
Right.
Yeah. Now, Miss Flora's clothes are labeled as well. The artist, he only seemed to label the women's clothing. So her shirt has the arrows. It's labeled like blue. Then her coat is labeled red and green. And she is saying, "We are not friends. We are Italians." So I don't know. But like we said, we'll post this back up on Instagram. Now, the first paragraph of this article, it's pretty ridiculous. I have to kind of believe that it's fabricated in some way. It starts off with, "Shades of Italy and dialect, expression and costume ran riot in Judge Henry Johnson's division of county court yesterday during the divorce trial of Dorinda and Demencio Labata." So the article, it gets really outlandish and claims that Dominic came home one day and unexpectedly found Dorinda with 15 of her countrymen making merry in his house. I mean, what do you even say to this?
I know.
Sure, maybe she's had affairs, but 15 men? I mean, that seems like a little bit of an elaboration. But Miss Flora, you know, the lady with the bird hat that sounds like a donkey, she was Dorinda's neighbor, and she came to testify that Dorinda did have a good reputation. And when the judge asked Miss Flora if she and Dorinda were friends, Miss Flora responded with, "Oh no, we are Italians." Like, that's such a comment.
Yeah, that's I don't really get it.
Oh, I know. So then
Or
Dorinda
she thinks friends is another nationality or something.
maybe that's true. Yeah. She's like, no, we're not Finnish. We're Italian. So then Dorinda's attorney asked her if she ever saw 40 men. So now we've gone from 15 to 40 in Dorinda's house. And Miss Flora responded, "No, only in her yard." Like, what is happening? Is this like a translation problem? Like,
Right.
Were they gardeners? What were they doing? I don't know. Ultimately, the judge decided that it would be best if neither Dominic nor Dorinda received custody of the boys and instead sent them to a local orphanage, St. Vincent's. Now, Dorinda and Dominic, they were allowed one visit each week to see the boys. And in December of 1906, a year after the divorce, Dorinda was accused of stealing her 2 sons from the orphanage. So apparently, Dorinda showed up at the orphanage one day and asked to take the boys to a photographer, but never brought them back. So after a massive search, the boys were returned to the orphanage, and Dorinda ended up facing kidnapping charges.
Oh, wow.
And so after this incident, Demencio, he actually was granted full custody of the boys, and he left Denver. It was rumored that he moved to Canada. So I'm
With
not
the
really
boys.
sure. With the boys, yeah. If that's true, Dorinda, she probably never saw her boys again because 4 years later, she was murdered. So that was probably the last time she saw her boys.
Oh, yeah.
But Dorinda married again. She married a Clemente Cellante, and that was her final marriage. They married November 27th, 1905, and she'd only been divorced from Demencio for 6 months. Now, back to November of 1910 when Dorinda went missing. Angelina held a christening celebration at her home for her youngest child, Tony. Remember our little guy who got her out of out of jail? And that was held on November 6, 1910. And Dorinda and her husband, her most recent one, Clemente, they were at the party along with Clemente's brother, Marco. There were kind of rumors swarming around the Italian colony at this time that there may have been some sort of a romance happening between Dorinda and Marco, which, if you think back to her first marriage, when her husband left for Italy, she apparently hooked up with his brother Omega. Remember that?
Right.
So there could have been some truth to that, maybe. I don't know, but it's kind of a
Well, it keeps showing up.
showing up. So now there was another gentleman at the party, Gene Canto, and somehow Marco ends up shooting and almost killing him that same night at this party. So
Wow, some party.
I know, right? It's a christening too.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
It's crazy. So there were a lot of different rumors and reports in the paper of why Marco shot this man. One rumor was that Marco hated the marriage between his brother and Dorinda and would often speak ill towards Dorinda. Well, Gian Canto, he ended up standing up for her during this party, and this angered Marco, so he pulled out a revolver and fired 2 bullets. But Angelina told a reporter that Marco showed up to her house for the celebration and he was drunk and they wouldn't let him in. And then when he left, he encountered Gian Canto and that's when he shot him. So there was just a lot of rumors going on. But
Yeah.
regardless, this incident happened. And an officer, Sarconi, he came to the party and he actually went searching for Marco. And this officer believed that Dorinda knew where he was located. And he threatened to come back the very next day and arrest her if she didn't reveal Marco's location. And apparently this was the last time that Dorinda was seen alive. So she disappeared that very same day from
wow.
Angelina's house. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
So Officer Sarconi and another Italian officer, they were under a lot of pressure to find Marco. These 2 officers were placed on this case because they were Italian, they spoke Italian. So I think they had a lot of pressure on them to find Marco, and that was probably why they told her
They were going to come and arrest her.
the next day. Exactly. So when the police interviewed Angelina and Clemente, they both had the same story as to when the last time they saw Dorinda was, which was Saturday, November 12th, 1910. Angelina, however, told the police that she believed Dorinda knew where Marco was hiding, and basically she was kind of insinuating that maybe this is why Dorinda was missing.
Right.
So once the body was found, Clemente and Angelina promised to go to the coroner's the next day to identify the body. And the police said that they believe Dorinda was killed within the Italian community and was then transferred to the ditch north of Denver. The police also had a theory of their own that they were working on that involved many Italians in Denver. In a Denver Post article from November 29th, 1910, the headline read, "Band of cutthroats blamed for murders in Italian colony." So the police were kind of leaning towards this idea that maybe there was a small gang of assassins, serial killers made up of Italians running around the Italian colony of Denver and murdering random Italians.
Wow.
And to be fair, I guess I can see why they explored this theory. There was actually a lot of really strange murders. So many, in fact, that they threatened to start exploring everyone's cellars for victims. So, I guess I can kind of see where they were coming from if there's that much happening. The chief of police, he was also quoted saying that Dorinda could possibly be a part of this gang and that she was known to not be able to keep a secret. So basically the chief's floating another theory here on why Dorinda possibly disappeared. And many believed that Angelina was actually in charge of this gang and had something to do with Dorinda's disappearance.
Wow.
If this is true and Angelina was actually in charge, what a force to be reckoned with. I mean, women were not known to run things like this in 1910. Run anything, really.
Yeah, she's involved in a lot of things.
There's an article from the Denver Rocky Mountain News on December 1st, 1910, and it calls Angelina a strange clairvoyant who has been tied to rumors of missing women. And there were claims from the Italians in Little Italy that they were paralyzed with fear and they wouldn't give answers to officials that led anywhere, especially to Angelina. So, that tells you the mark she had on the colony.
Yeah.
So when the police were interviewing Angelina about Dorinda, apparently she would laugh at the police officers' questions. And if she chose to answer it, she wouldn't really give anything that was worthwhile, any kind of answer. And so apparently she let a newspaper man come into her house to search for Dorinda, which that's pretty weird, right?
Yeah, that's like, well, clear me. Show you that because I hauled her up north.
Yeah. She was not in my house. I put her in my wagon and took her away. Exactly. So this reporter is going through her house and she's following him around and laughing. And eventually she goes down to her cellar and apparently retrieves a shovel. And she handed the reporter the shovel and apparently said, "Go dig around. Maybe you find the body." It kind of gives me chills.
Yeah.
I wonder what went through his head when she handed him, if this is true, when she handed him the shovel and he was like,
probably thinking, am I digging my own grave?
Exactly. That's probably exactly what he's thinking. I don't know. It's very interesting. Now, one interesting part of this is Dorinda was said to be a major witness for Angelina in her real estate fraud trial that she was going through. So it's weird because if Dorinda was testifying for Angelina, she's pretty valuable to Angelina.
Yeah.
It's also said that the two of them were really close and spent a lot of time together. In fact, Angelina told a reporter from the Denver Post that her and Dorinda only lived a block away from each other. And Dorinda would spend her days taking care of Angelina's house and children while Angelina was out working on her real estate business. And she told the reporter that Dorinda took care of her children the last time she was in jail. Angelina. All right, so let's talk about the murder of Dorinda. A headline that caught my attention in the Denver Post stated, "With stiletto and club, a murderer put an end to the life of Miss Cellante." And I know what a stiletto is now. I know it's a knife, but back in 2023, when I started this podcast and I read the stiletto, all I pictured at that time was a red high heel shoe. So sadly, Dorinda's head, it was almost completely removed. She was blindfolded and the body was wrapped in burlap. So it was, when they said mutilated, that's definitely true. In an article from the Denver Post, the author, he provided an extremely detailed breakdown of what Dorinda was wearing when her body was found. She was wearing a dress that had like a really coarse gray texture. I'm thinking maybe wool. I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like it, with gray.
Coarse. Yeah. But she also had a heavy robe, kind of like, they said it was similar to a bathrobe, but I'm picturing more like a cloak to keep you warm. Okay. It's cold months. And in the pockets of the robe were numerous keys and a small purse that contained $1.05. She had tan lace boots on. She had a rosary of black beads with an onyx cross around her neck. She also had a gold band on her wedding finger, gold earrings that had a red setting in them, maybe garnets. And her hair was also described as being reddish brown, which is interesting. And there's actually also a sketch that accompanied this article, and we'll post this up on social media. But the sketch was like different than the description, of course. Her clothes were described as being black and white checkered instead of gray. So just really weird things. It's like, how did you not catch that?
Right.
They described, her height and her weight. But at the very bottom of the sketch, they have a note stating, evidently foreign born. How do you know that? First of all, your sketch doesn't even match the written description,
Right.
so we can't trust you. And her body, like, she'd been out there a while, so there had been some decomposition that took place. On Tuesday, November 29th, 1910, Clemente was actually arrested.
Oh, wow. Her husband.
Yeah, and though they stated that they weren't really arresting him out of suspicion, but they wanted to question him. And we have actually ran across this a little bit. It seems like at times they would arrest people and put them in jail, even if they were just witnesses and questioning back then. And so it's sort of a little scary. But after his interrogation, the police let him go. They said that they didn't believe he had anything to do with the murder of his wife. The chief of police stated that he was a jealous husband, but they didn't think that that led to him murdering his wife. Once it was determined that the body found was Dorinda's, the chief of police made a public statement stating that the feuding in the Italian colony has gone too far and needs to come to an end. He points out that this feud has followed the Italians from Napoli to America. He said the feuding stems from family feuds and criminal acts. And he also told the public that a squad of police detectives have been put together to find these, quote, cutthroats and either hang them, drive them out of town, or send them to prison so that the Italians of Denver can breathe freely. The chief of police also indicated that he was concerned that the Italians who were willing to speak to the police were being continually threatened. He points out one scenario where an Italian man woke up one morning to have an eye drawn on the outside of his front door. And I'm not sure if this somehow connects to the evil eye, Malocchio. Yeah. So on November 30th, 1910, Angelina was accused and named a suspect in the murder of Dorinda, but she was not held by the police. And by mid-December, the authorities had interviewed multiple witnesses, but could not determine truly who murdered Dorinda. After this, Dorinda's case went cold. However, Angelina was the top suspect in the murder.
Wow.
So it is easy to forget that while all of this is happening with Dorinda, Angelina was actually preparing for her trial regarding her forgery charges for real estate fraud. And the first day of her trial was on December 19th, 1910, and baby Tony was there, but this time they kept him out of the courtroom. He actually stayed in the sheriff's office, eating a cracker and being watched by a nurse. So the prosecutor on the first day of the trial spent time discussing the potential fraud that was committed against Giovanni Iacovetta. And Angelina's handwriting, especially the way she wrote a lowercase a, seemed to be the strongest piece of evidence that pointed to Angelina's guilt. A handwriting expert, George Keene, pointed out that Angelina's way of writing a small a was, quote, the most peculiar he had ever seen. He looked at multiple deeds thought to be forged by Angelina and determined that they were all written and signed by the same person, and that person he believed was Angelina.
Oh, wow.
And he pointed out that when Angelina wrote a lowercase a after another lowercase letter, she made the a in two strokes. So she would first make an oval and then put a tell on it. But if she wrote the lowercase a after a capital letter, or if there was a separation in the word, she made the lowercase a in one stroke. So he was really detailed here.
Right.
I actually found this really fascinating. And I know, handwriting analysis is not really reliable now, or used in too many cases, but it was really interesting to read about.
Because this isn't looking good for her.
It's not looking good for her. Angelina and her A's. Uh-oh. Another piece of evidence the prosecutor used to show how much of a, quote, master fraudster Angelina was the fact that on one of the deeds, the notary, John R. Keyes, misspelled the word April. He spelled it Aprile. What's interesting about this is the Italian way of spelling April, not the English way.
Oh.
And if you look at the name, if you listen to the name John Keyes, I'm guessing he's probably not Italian. So this was obviously odd to the prosecutor. I thought that was a really good catch because the notary would not spell it that way. So when Angelina was on the stand, the prosecutor asked her to spell April, and she spelled it the way she knew how, the Italian way. The prosecutor also had Angelina write April 11th, and she wrote 11 April, with April, of course, being spelled like it is in Italian. In my opinion, I feel like this is more of a damning piece of evidence involving Angelina's writing than the letter A.
Right.
Because John R. Keyes, he's not Italian, I mean...
He's not going to spell it that way.
He's not going to spell it that way, exactly. The prosecutor, he actually also pointed out that with the date being written as 11 April instead of April 11th, that was different as well.
Oh, yeah, putting the
day before the month.
Right.
Yeah. So I guess like the more American way you could say is April 11th instead of 11 April. So, but on January 7th, 1911, Angelina was convicted of forgery and received a sentence of 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, she got herself in a little bit of trouble there. And when the judge read her sentence, many reporters said that Angelina just sat there with a small smile on her face.
Wow, nothing bothers her.
Does not bother her. But I think we will stop there for the end of episode 2 and pick back up next week talking about Angelina's next murder of Maria LaGuardia.
She doesn't stop.
She is such a fascinating person. I mean, like,
yeah, to be so smart, but not using it in the legal way.
Exactly. I mean, she's like a hustler. I mean, she's out there making deals and doing all of these different kind of things to bring money in for her family, but just not doing
She
it the
should
right
have just
way.
got a realtor's license.
Right, I know.
Done it the proper way.
Done it the proper way. And we hope you enjoyed listening to the second part of Angelina's story, and we hope you come back to listen to more stories of Italian Americans. See you next time.
See you next time.